Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vishishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi Yo Antaha Pravishya Mama Vacha Imam Prashuptam Sanjeevayati Akhila Shaktidara Swadamnam Anyamshcha Hasta Charana Shravanatvagadin Pranan Namo Bhagavate Purushaya Tubhyam लसतु श्रीमदानन्दतीर्थेन्दुर्नो हृदम्बरे यद्वचश्चन्द्रिका स्वान्तसन्तापं विनिकृन्तति पदवाक्यप्रमाणज्ञान् प्रणम्य शिरसा गुरून् व्याकरिष्ये यथाबोधं विष्णुतत्त्वविनिर्णयम्. Okay, good evening, guys. Good afternoon and good morning. So this is our 8th session of Isha Upanishad. So we are almost halfway through the Isha Upanishad. So I thought we will start off today's session with a brief quiz. Okay. So I would want you all to sort of chip in and answer these questions. So my first question, this is just a revision for all of us. What are the other names of Isha Upanishad? So who wants to take that?
Mantropanishad.
Yeah.
Samhitopanishad.
Yeah.
Kanva Upanishad.
Yeah. Anything else? Mantriya Yagna Upanishad. Yeah. So those are some of the answers. So well done. So excellent answer. So the next question: which portion of the Veda is this Upanishad from? Which part? Which shake? Which branch of the Veda?
Samhite.
Samhita. Okay. So which portion of the Rig, Yajur, Sama, Atharvan? So which one is it?
I thought Yajur Veda. It's from Yajur Veda. I thought.
Okay, brilliant.
Because Yagnavalkya.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
Which part, which Yajur Veda, Shilaji? Krishna Yajur Veda, Shukla Yajur Veda?
Shukla Yajur Veda.
Okay, Shukla Yajur.
Pradaranyaka and Isha, I thought Shukla Yajur Veda.
Yeah, wonderful. So in the Shukla Yajur Veda, there are two shakes, Madhyandina shake and Kanva shake. So which particular shake is this Upanishad?
Because you have put Kanva Rishi in this, it must be Kanva shake.
Yeah, well done. Okay, so it is the Kanva recension of the Shukla Yajur Veda, and it comes in the Samhita portion. Okay, very good. So how many mantras are there in this Upanishad?
18.
18. Excellent. Okay, now somebody needs to spend a few more minutes talking about this. So what is the context of this Upanishad? So who wants to give us a background?
Shall I try? I don't know.
Yeah, try. Go for it. Yeah.
Svayambu Manu is 10th rank in the Deva's pantheon, Veda's Vedic pantheon, and he's even though he's a Prajapati, of the Manvantaras, he wants, the Asuras are trying to, my English is failing. So he prays to Yajnanamaka Deva for giving him strength to, no, my English is...
No problem, Shilaji, no problem. I think you got the gist of it. Anybody else wants to chip in? Okay, no worries. So you need to think about how the earth, our Vedic Rishis always knew that the earth was revolving around the sun. How the orbit of the earth around the sun was disturbed by, who's the Asura? Hiranyaksha. And how when Hiranyaksha did, the earth was going to be destroyed. So then Varaha comes up and puts earth back in the orbit. And then what happens is, we know that this happened twice. One is in Svayambu Manvantara, the other one was in the Vaivashvata Manvantara. And then in the Svayambhu Manvantara, when the earth came out of its orbit, Varaha then put it back. But then the Asura said that here is another option. Why don't we just directly go and kill this Svayambhu Manu himself, so that then this earth is destroyed. So it is at that point As Sheilaji mentioned, Svayambu Manu goes in prayer to Yagna Paramatma. Excellent. So what are the chandas in this Upanishad? What are the 3 chandas that are frequently used in this Upanishad?
Anushtup, Brahati, and one other you said. Jagat. No,
Okay.
got it wrong. Yeah.
30%. Neeta Shushul?
Anushtup, Trishtup, and Jagati.
Okay, very good. So I think Neetaji got all the 3 right. So Anushtup, Trishtup, and Jagati. So we got a chat forum, a question coming in. Anushtup, Trishtup by Suresh. Thank you, Suresh. So now is the big question. Who are the rishis of this? As you know, whenever we do Upanishad Chintana, you have to think about Rishi, Devata, and Chandas. So who is the Rishi for this? And there is a long list of rishis. So let's see if we can get this all right. So who are the rishis for this Upanishad?
Kanva Rishi and Dadichi.
Kanva Rishi, Dadichi, very good, Pratibhaji. Anybody else? Any other answers? Sheilaji mentioned that briefly a few minutes ago.
Yagnavalkya, Svayambu.
Yagnavalkya, yeah, excellent. And then, of course, Svayambu Manu is also a Rishi. So Kanva Rishi, Dadichi, Svayambu Manu, Yagnavalkya, they're all the Rishis. Very good.
All the acharyas and sages.
All the acharyas and the sages who come down the generation to impart the knowledge about this Upanishad. Wonderful. Who is the Devata for this?
Yajna
Yajnanamaka Paramatma. Excellent. So fantastic. So that's a good revision of what we have been doing over the past 8 weeks now. But these are all the key ideas, the basic fundamentals that should always be in our fingertips. Okay, thank you very much for everyone who participated in this brief quiz. So let's move on. So what have we done so far? We have done 7 mantras. And today we are going to do the 8th mantra. Okay, so we are almost coming to the halfway through this Upanishad. Okay, so still a long way to go. But the next half, I think, will progress a little bit more smoothly. Today's verse is a little bit complicated. Okay, so what is this? What is the overall structure of the Upanishad? So you could divide that into 4. So you can divide it into 4 khandas, if you like, or 4 parts. So the first part talks about the nature of the knower of Brahman, the nature of the knowers of Brahman. So this is the adhikaris or the mumukshus. How should they actually be? Ishavasyam gidang sarvam yatkincha jagatyam jagattena tyaktena punjitaha magradaha kasya sviddanam kuruvanneve iha kuru karmani jijiji vishet shatang samaha evam tvayi na anyato asti na karma lipyate nare. What happens to the haters of Brahman? So Svayambu Manu also censures. Remember, this is, he's contemplating, he's meditating on Yagna Paramatma, and he's thinking these ideas. Asurya namate lokaha andena tamasa avrutaha tamste pratyagachati yekecha atmahano janaha. He who kills the Atman, atmahano, and there are various types of folks who kill the Atman, and we have done this before. Then what are the upasanas of Brahman? How do you contemplate and worship or understand this Brahman? This is where we are. And we've spent about a month or so talking about this because these are all very famous mantras in the Vedas. Anejadekam manaso javiho nainad devaha apnuvan purvamarshate tad devato anyan atyeti tishtate asmin apo matarishva dadat. And we spent a lot of in a place here about who is a guru and what is important, why a guru is required, etc. And we also understood that for Svayambu Manu, he considers Matarishva as his guru. And there are certain schools. There is a particular school of Vedanta which gets inspiration from Svayambu Manu and considers Matarishva as their primary guru who can actually teach us the knowledge of the Vedas. Tattejati, tannejati, taddure, tad antike, tad antarasya sarvasya, tad sarvasya bahyataha, yastu sarvani bhutani atmanyeva anupashyati, sarvabhuteshu cha atmanam tato na vijugupshate, yasmin sarvani bhutani atmanyeva abhut vijanataha, tatra ko mohaha kaha shokaha ekatvam anupashyataha. So these were all the verses that we have done so far. So today's verse is going to be Sapariyagat. Shukram, Akayam, Abranam, Asnaviram, Shuddam, Apapa Viddam, Kavir, Manishihi, Paribuhu, Svayambuhu, Yata Tatyato Artan, Vyadadat, Shashvatibhyaha, Samabhyaha. So this is a very, I mean, needless to say, every mantra of any Upanishad is important, but these are some profound lines that Svayambu or Manu is telling us about the greatness of Brahman. So we need to see this verse in all its glory, and hopefully we will deal with this over the next couple of weeks. Okay. So in the last 7 verses, the ideas of the Vedic concepts of God, the Upasana of Brahman, what we have understood from all that Svayambu or Manu has done is that this Brahman is omnipresent. That is a fundamental category of Vedic conception of God. God is, the Paramatma is somebody who is all pervasive, super conscious entity that is there everywhere. That is the first dictum of Vedic philosophy. Then the next one is omnipotent and omniscient. And how do we understand this omnipotency of Brahman? Not just some of the characteristics that we see in people in the material world, but this Brahman has totally non-material characteristics. And some of these characteristics may be very difficult for you and me to comprehend because they appear to be contradictory. So this is because of what we call as a Achintya Adbhuta Shakti. He can be in one place and he can also be everywhere simultaneously. He can be, he can be Anu, he can be Vibhu. All those contradictory things that we have discussed. So Achintya Shakti of Brahman is very important. And Svayambhu Manu discusses that. And then he said very first, Anejat. He said he is fearless. He is knowable. He is not avachya. He is not completely beyond our reach. He is knowable through a guru. And he is knowable through a guru whom he says is Matarishva. And how does the guru teaches us? Deep study of the scriptures and its contemplation. And that is how Matarishva is defined in Balikta Shukta. Ashapta Shivasu Matrushu. As the Balikta Shukta defines who the Matarishva is. That guru who is constantly engrossed only in the 7 primary scriptures. Okay. And that is why a deep study of the scriptures for us through a guru who has done the deep study of the scriptures. That is what is important. We don't want fake gurus, and there are quite a few of those available everywhere, including in the internet space, but we want some genuine guru of the ancient times. I certainly do not follow any gurus of the modern times. I go to the ancient times and follow the gurus because I think most of them have an agenda these days. Okay. So deep studies of the scriptures and its contemplation is required through a guru. God's knowledge and practice of this leads to fearlessness. It removes ignorance and sorrow. Okay, so those are all summary slides that we have done so far over the last 7 verses. So these are the key concepts of Brahman or Paramatma in the Vedas. So in the 8th mantra, what Svayambhu Manu does is he concludes his, in contemplation of Brahman. Okay, so what are his concluding statements? And these are beautiful verses worth memorizing. And I would strongly urge that 18 mantras of Isha Upanishad is not a lot of mantras, and we should be able to memorize that and recite it every day. So what does he say? Saha Paryagat, Shukram, Akayam, Avranam, Asnaviram, Shuddam, Apapa Viddam. That is what he is praising this Paramatma. Then he says, Kavihi, Manishihi, Paribuhu, Svayambuhu. The last line is super important. Yata Tatyato Artan, Vyadatat, Shashvatibhyaha, Samabhyaha. Okay. So what do these things mean? So the first thing that we need to approach this is, as we had a discussion in our quiz, this is an unusual verse, because remember, this verse, 8th verse, has got 4 lines in it. All the previous mantras appear to have only 2 lines. So as you know, and we had this quiz, you have Anushtup, Trishtup, and Jagati. Those are all the chandas in which Ishavasya Upanishad comes. So the previous 7 verses are either Anushtup or they are Trishtup. Whereas this one is Jagati. Okay. In fact, for those of us who are interested in the science of chandas and who want to know the nitty-gritties of it, and if you want to count the number of letters in this particular mantra, it's actually 48 syllables plus 2 syllables. So it's actually got 50 syllables, but it is still considered as Jagati Chandas because in the Vedic rules, plus 2 is accepted. It's exactly like golf. So either you can have on par, you can have an eagle and all that kind of stuff. So it's a similar kind of rules in Vedas. So this 48.2 is called Swarat Jagati Chandas. Okay. Now, what are the primary chandas and what are their Abhimani Devatas? And I've actually put a quiz here, but I've actually got the answers here on the right. So who wants to recite that? What are the 7 primary chandas and what are the Abhimani Devatas of the 7 primary chandas? So who wants to take this up? The answer is there. Please read it out just for our revision. Okay, no worry. Okay, go for it, Pragnesh.
Thank you. Gayatri, the Abhimani Devata is Swaha, Ushnik, Samginya, Anushtup Rohini, Bruhati Tara, Pandi Ashkaganga, Tushtup Sachi, and Jagatyash all.
Okay, thank you, Pragnesh. So let's remember this. 7 primary chandas. Gayatri, Ushnik, Anushtup, Bruhati, Pankti, Trishtup, Jagati. Yeah. Jagatyashta Chandamsi, as the verse goes. Okay, so each chandas has got a devati, a devata or a devata stri. What are the, Rohini, Sangya, Rohini, Tara, Asiknya, Ganga, Sachi, they are all the consorts of various devatas. Okay, that is another quiz for another day. So each chandas has got a devata also, but for Jagati Chandas, it is all the devatas are the Abhimani devatas. So it's a very important chandas. It's a big chandas and it's got all the devatas are Abhimani devatas. And also, if you look at Isha Upanishad, one of the interesting things there is, it's got Anushtup, Trishtup, Jagati, and we might have touched this very briefly before. So how do these chandas work? 8 times 4 is 32 is Anushtup. 11 times 4 is Trishtup. 12 times 4 is 48. 8, 11, and 12 are directly related to Vasu, Rudra, Aditya. So these are all the various, deities in the Vedic pantheon. Okay, Vasus, there are Ashtavashus, Eka, Dasha, Rudra, Dwadasha, Adityas. Okay, so in the Adityas, 12 Adityas, who are those described in the Vedas? Vivaswan, Aryaman, Twashta, Savitra, Bhaga, Datta, Mitra, Varuna, Amsha, Pushan, Indra, and the last one is called Vamana. Okay, so who is going to tell us who Vamana is? Who is Vamana of the Vedas?
He is Narayana himself.
Yeah. So it's Narayana's avatar. Suresh, thank you very much. Anybody else? Neeta, Sushru, did you have something to say?
Yeah, he is the one who puts his foot on Bali.
Yeah. So beautiful. Yeah, thank you very much. So Vamana becomes important in Jagati Chandas. Okay, he's a 12th Aditya and he is Narayana himself. He's called Vamana. And you may remember Katha Upanishad, we have done this before. Urdhvam pranam unnayati, apanam pratyagasyati, madhye vamanam, asinam vishve devaha upasate. So go and check that particular mantra out and how we discuss the glory of Vamana Avatara and how Vamana and Yama then says, that Vama is Tad Vishnoho Paramam Padam. And who is that Vishnu? He says, Madhye Vamanam Asinam Vishve Devaha Upasate. So Katha Upanishad is very clear with regards to who the Brahman is. For Yama, the Brahman is Tad Vishnoho Paramam Padam and Vamana. Okay. For folks who think that Brahman is a useless zero, that is not the language of Katha Upanishad, nor is the language of the Yagniya Mantropanishad. They both consider this Brahman or the Supreme Personality as Vishnu's avatar himself, be it Vamana or be it Yajnanamaka Paramatma. So I hope you are able to link all this because as I keep saying, the Samanvaya of Shastra is complete. When you do the inner linking, just like how you do it in science, it's perfectly logical. The same Vamana is the Abhimani of the Jagati Chandas, And all the Devatas, trees are also Abhimanis of this Chandas, which is what we are going to be discussing. Sapariyagat, Shukram, Akayam, Abranam, Asnavaram, Shuddham, Apapa Viddham. So I'm hoping over the next 45 minutes, we might be able to do at least the first 2 lines. So let's see what happens. This is a busy slide. Saha Pariyagat. So if you remember in the last previous 7 verses, Svayambu Manu is doing Upasana of Brahman, and then now he says that person who has a knowledge of Brahman. And if you remember the previous verses, he has used various words and they're all important. Again, that's what we had to always go back, look for internal evidence and also within the Vedas. So the internal evidence within the last 7 mantras, Svayambu Manu has used various words. Janataha, Vijanataha, Pashyataha, Anupashyataha. So these are all the stages of knowledge. Knowledge, jnana is a very superficial knowledge. Vijnana is a deeper knowledge. Pashyataha is experiential knowledge. Anupashyataha is Shastra Anuguna experiential knowledge. Okay, so as we climb the knowledge ladder, we should all be aiming to reach this stage of Anupashyataha, because that is what a mumukshu or an adhikarin does. Okay, so hold on to that idea. Having said janataha, vijanataha, pashyataha, anupashyataha, our Svayambu Manu puts a word here, saha pariyagat. Saha means that person, that adhikarin who has contemplated on Brahman like this. Okay, that is how he starts the next mantra. So there, that saha is the adhikarin. Okay, adhikarin or mumukshu. So I'm going to break there for a minute. What is our understanding of what an adhikarin or a mumukshu is as per Sanatana Dharma or as per our Shastras? Who is an adhikarin or who is an eligible person? And who is that mumukshu? So who wants to take that up? I put a verse from Jayatirtha from Nyaya Sudha, but you can give your views with regards to what is the understanding of who the adhikarin is.
Who is a seeker of the ultimate truth, who has a thirst, real thirst to know about the Bhagavanta.
Yeah, beautiful, Pratibhaji. So when will that thirst to know Bhagavanta going to come? Because you may have a thirst, but there has to be a starting point, right? At some point, he needs to get this thirst. When does that usually happen?
Okay, can I try? My name is Prakash. I'm from New Jersey.
Yeah, go for it, Prakashji. Welcome to the group.
Thank you. So our what they says is the different, so many Vivida samsarika dukkha darshana viraktasya. That is, he sees the dukkha samsara, so many different types of samsara dukkhas, and he gets dispassionate and gets disattached from them. Then he develops the shama, that is shama dhamma, that is Bhagavan nishta buddhi and dhamma control. Then he becomes a mumukshu adhikari. That's what he has written.
Beautiful, Prakashji. Thank you so much. So, ihahi vivida samsarika dukkha darshanena viraktasya samadhamadi mataha mumukshoho adhikarinaha. Pragneshji, you had raised your hands.
We also learned in the previous Upanishad that Nachiketa was an ideal seeker, because you also seek and understand when you are challenged. And one of the fundamental tenet of in Hindu, our scriptures and the Vedas is the challenging. That's what you have been teaching us.
Yeah.
So Nachiketa was an ideal student.
Yeah. So ideal student, ideal student and adhikari is a person who actually, you have to go through samsara, right? There is no way around it. Let's face up to it. Ordinary mortals like us have to go through the samsara, and all of us will have ups and downs of life. And most of us will go through the ups and downs of life, and we just not even bother asking the deeper questions as to why this is happening in my life, but we just go through it, and then once our innings is done, we just finished. But there are some jivas who actually question this. After having seen the ups and downs of life, then they question, why on earth is this happening? Who is controlling it? Why is this happening? Okay, so that is the person. He is the adhikarin. Okay, so that I just thought we will introduce that idea of who that saha or adhikarin is. Now, here is an important idea that we should never forget, and I've said attention, please, because in the last 7 verses, and again, I'm not tired talking about the contextual, the prakarana, the contextual relevance of what kind of discussions we're having. So in the last 3 verses, he has talked so much about the indweller and the indwelt, the ruler and the ruled. And then we have taken the verses from Gita also, the thread and the beads. So in the last 3 verses, Svayambu Manu basically saying, he's actually, let's understand, he's actually in front of Yagna Paramatma. This Paramatma avatara is right in front of him. And he's praying to him. And so there is so much difference there. There is the Svayambu Manu, and then there is the Yagna Paramatma. There is the indweller, there is the indwelt. There is the ruler, there is the ruled. There is the thread, there is the beads. There is these differences that is described categorically in these 7 verses of Upasana of Brahman. And that is why the same Jayatirtha says, Paramatmano atyanta binnasya swataha chidanandatmakasyapi jivasya anadi avidya kama karmadi nimitto ayam paramartata eva anyata karaha dukkadi anartaha na parameshwara prasadad rute apagacchati. Nacha asakshat kruto asau prasidati, nacha avidita swarupaha shakyate, shakshat kartum iti sakala guna karataya, nishesha dosha gandha viduradaya tatstam, pratipadayitum ashesha amnayaha pravartante tad upakarana bhutacha brahma mimamsa iti paramartha. So this is a summum bonum of the whole of the Vedic philosophy for the journey of souls, and we have done this. So this Paramatmano Atyanta Binnasya is important from Svayambhu Manu's perspective, because that is what he is talking. You are this, I am small. You are big, I am this. And he keeps on comparing. And that is important because that is how our jnana develops. Jnana, Vijnana, Pashya, Anupashya. Because we have done this journey of souls, right? That this is not a sprint. This journey of souls is a marathon. And even for Svayambhu Manu, who is a soul, this is still a marathon for him. And he knows that this Paramatma can be known only through the Vedas. And the Vedas can be understood only through Brahma Mimamsa. And to do this, he needs Matarishva. That is why he said, Tasmin Apo Matarishva Dadati. He is to be known as the abode of infinite auspicious attributes and without any defects. Unless we know him, we cannot see him. Unless we see him, we cannot obtain his grace. Okay? And unless we have this Sakshatkara, as it's called, or Bimba Sakshatkara, as it's called, there is no chance of actually getting rid of our samsara. So that is why these words from the previous verse become so relevant when we understand who the Saha is or the Adhikari. Okay, so I hope that made sense. Now, the reason why I had to go through this, then because the next word, to understand the next word, we had to go through this cycle of understanding who the Adhikarin is. So once that Adhikarin, let us say here Svayambhu Manu is the Adhikarin, and he has done Jnana, Vijnana, Pashya, Anupashya. Then what happens? Saha Pariyagat is the next word, and that becomes important. Saha Pariyagat. Okay? It's a very interesting word, and that's of course is the beauty of Vedic Sanskrit. So Pariyagat. Pariyagat means you have to split it open. Pari and Agat. Okay. Agat means to go. Okay. Gamana, ga, gachati, all those words that you're familiar with. Agachati, agamana, and all that stuff. So, Agat means to go. And in Vedic philosophy, to go means to know. Okay. To know, jnana. Okay. Pari means paripurna. Okay. Full as per our capacity. So I was supposed to have a series of glass cups here, all cups of different sizes, which are all full of water. And each cup, when individually seen, is full. Okay? But their fullness is different from individual cups based on the Jiva Swabhava. So when he has Pariyagat, so when he knows as per his capacity, so that Adhikari, when he knows as per his capacity, he reaches. So another meaning of Pariyagat is he reaches somewhere. Okay. So as per his capacity, when he knows, he reaches. Okay, so that is the idea behind Saha Paryagat. So this verse in Taittiriya Upanishad that I've said, Yato Vacho Nivartante Aprapya Manasa Saha, needs to be watched very carefully. When it says Aprapya Manasa Saha means, does not mean Brahman is not reachable at all. Okay, Aprapya Manasa Saha means he cannot be reached fully. He can be reached as per individual capacities. And if he cannot be reached, then Svayambu Manu is not going to say Sa Paryagat. So that is another way of looking at it. When he says Sa Paryagat, each one of us at some point we will reach, or we will know that Brahman. Who is that Brahman? And here Svayambu Manu gives a very grand ideas about the concept of Brahman, or the supreme deity, or the supreme Paramatma as per Vedic philosophy, and a whole lot of the entire philosophy is compressed in these verses. Okay, and what does it say? Saha Paryagat. Let's recite it again. Shukram. Who is this Brahman? He is Shukram. Akayam. Avranam. Avranam is also called Abhranam in the original recitation. Certainly the Acharya would say Abhranam, but modern verses says Avranam. They have the same meanings. Okay, Avranam, Asnaviram, that is interesting. And he Shuddham, he is Apapaviddham. So that is how Svayambhuva Manu is contemplating this Brahman. Okay. So now here, I just wanted to introduce this idea about usually how do we understand the verses in the Upanishads? We have to Guru Mukhena learn it. So we have to read it through a Guru and then learn this. Okay, not pick up an English transliteration, which unfortunately I just hate it. I just don't go to the English transliterations at all, because when I read it, I really get very uncomfortable with the type of discussions that go there. What we should do is do it only through a Guru Mukha, ideally an Acharya, and understand this. Okay, so these verses become important because without causing any controversy, the direct reference to these verses from the Varaha Purana. So if you go to Varaha Purana, for every word that is there, Shukram, for example, here you will say, where is it? Akayam Lingavarjanat, Shuddham Stula Deha Rahitvat. So it gives individual meaning. So what the Varaha Purana does is, and that is how you link it. So when you do, we have done this before, right? When you do Prasthana Trayas, when you do Upanishad, we have to use Sutra Prasthana, we have to use Gita Prasthana, and wherever required, you also have to bring Puranas. And for this particular Upanishad, Bhagavata Purana is very important, as you know, because Bhagavata Purana talks about this incident quite in detail. But also Varaha Purana becomes important for this mantra, because Varaha Purana actually gives the etymology of each word that is used here. So there are some folks, there are some transliterations that I've seen where they make up their own meanings. But actually, our ancient Puranas Varaha Purana has actually given a clear understanding of what individual words mean. So that is what I want to do. So that we avoid any controversies, we just go to the core scriptures and understand what each word is. So what is Shukram? Okay. So if you look at Shukram, so Shukram comes in various Upanishads. Here, of course, in the 8th mantra, it is there. In Katha Upanishad, you would have done this. Yesha Ashwattaha, Urdvo Arvak Shakaha, Yesha Ashwattaha, Sanatanaha, Tadeva Shukram, Tad Brahma, Tadeva Amrutam Uchyate, Tasmin Lokaha, Shritaha, Sarve, Tadun Atyeti, Na Atyeti, Kashtana Etad Vaitat. We have done this before, so this is almost like a revision for us. So Shukram can have several meanings, okay? Shukram can be Shubram, could be Shuklam. So they all means white. Shuklam is white, which is an indication of purity. Okay. But Varaha Purana here gives us a different etymology of Shukram, which is what we used when we were discussing Tadeva Shukram of Katha Upanishad. What does Varaha Purana says? Shukram Tat Shoka Rahityad. Clear statements from Varaha Purana. Tat shokam rahityad shukram. That means shoka plus rahita is shukra. Shoka means sorrow. Rahita means free. That Brahman is always free from sorrow. So that is the literal meaning of shukram. Okay. So what is the opposite of lack of sorrow? Eternal bliss. So that we understand as the primary, again, definition of Brahman as full of bliss. And in fact, the very first Samanvaya Sutra of Vedanta Sutra is Anandamayo Abhyasat. Okay, so this Anandamaya is discussed everywhere in the Vedas. And what Svayambu Manu does is when he says Shukram, we have to dig deep and understand what are all the implications of Shukram. If he is free from sorrow, it means the opposite, that he is full of infinite auspicious attributes. Taittiriya Upanishad also does the same thing. Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha anandam brahmano vidwan. Okay, so this is the answer for folks who thinks that Brahman is avachya and he cannot be known, he is unreachable. There is one school of Vedanta that thinks like that. Only thing is they have forgotten what the very next line describes this Brahman as. Anandam brahmano vidwan. Know that he is Anandam. Rasahi evam ayam labdva anandi bhavati. Kohevanyat kahapranyat idesha akashaha anando nasyat. So this Ananda is Brahman. And in fact, Chandogya Upanishad also says the same thing. Yo vai bhuma tat sukam. Okay. He is Sukha. Okay. So when you put all this, it tells you something, right? Because why is Svayambu Manu saying Shukram here? Because in the very previous mantra, when he said Yasmin Sarvani Bhutani Atmanyeva Abhut Vijanataha Tatra Ko Mohaha Kaha Shokaha. He said that person who knows the Brahman as without any sorrow, for that person, Kaha Shokaha, he will not have any shoka or sorrow. Because as we worship, so we attain. We know this famous verse, isn't it? Yata yata upasate tam tataiva bhavati. Okay? If you do upasana of Brahman as an absolute zero useless entity, we will become an absolute useless zero entity. If we worship Brahman as an abode of infinite auspicious attributes, then we reach our moksha sthiti where we experience our own purna ananda. So that is how we read it. Yam yata yata upasate tam tataiva bhavati. Okay. So now the question is, why is Brahman without sorrow? So this is a deeper philosophical question. Why should Brahman be without sorrow? Why do Vedic philosophy actually think that this Brahman is always an abode of infinite ananda? Not as somebody, if he is all pervasive being who has everything, that he must also have dukkha in him, right? But he doesn't have dukkha. Vedas describe him as only an abode of infinite bliss. So why do we think so? So I've just opened this up as a question. Why does Brahman not have any sorrow? So who wants to take this up? Any ideas as to why we think Brahman does not have sorrow?
Because he has no karma.
Okay, very good, Pratibhaji. Brilliant. Neeta Shishru?
I'm just thinking loud, mate, because to have sorrow, there must be some defect, and he has no defects. So he cannot have sorrow.
Yeah, excellent. Fantastic. So, yeah, both of you got certain angles to it. So, Pratibhaji said he doesn't have any karma. Okay, so Pratibhaji, I'm going to challenge you on that in a couple of slides later. But that's an interesting point about karma. And Sushil says he has no defects. That is why he is full of ananda. We have defects. That's why we have sorrow. What Svayambu Manu, he gives a very, very interesting insight as to why Brahman is Shukram. Okay. He says he is Shukram because he is Akayam. Okay. Akayam is his answer. Brahman is Shukra, Shoka Rahita, because he is Akayam. Okay. So to understand this word Akayam, Before I go to the next slide, I've got a small quiz again, because we have done this before. What are the coverings of the souls? So when we understand what are the coverings of the souls, then we can understand why Svayambu or Manu has said Akayam. So who is going to give us a brief overview of the various coverings of the souls? I put answers here. Soul, we can say 4 bodies or 5 koshas. So who wants to take up the 4 bodies first? And then the next one can do the, next friend can do the koshas. So who is going to do the bodies?
Bodies, perhaps.
Sthula Sharira, Sukshma Sharira, Karana Sharira. Are those the bodies?
Okay, Sheila ji has got 3. Suresh, you were going to say something?
Aniruddha Sharira, I was just trying to add to the 4 bodies.
Okay, so Sthula, Sukshma, Karana, Aniruddha. So we've had quite a few important terms that have come in. Anybody else? What is the 4th body?
Linga Sharira.
Linga Sharira.
Yeah.
Okay, Linga Sharira is the 3rd. What is the 4th? Deval.
Jiva.
Very good. Yes, so Jiva Swarupa itself is the 4th body, right? And the 5 koshas. So what are the 5 koshas? Who wants to take this up?
Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, and Anandamaya kosha.
Brilliant, Pratibhaji. Thank you so much. So when you talk about the souls, you're talking about the various coverings. Okay, 4 bodies and 5 koshas. Never forget this. So let's do a visual stop through revision. It's very important. So Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manonmaya, Vijnanamaya, Anandamaya, as Pratibhaji said, Annamaya is made of water and solids. Pranamaya is Vayu, Tejas, Akasha. Manonmaya is Manas, Buddhi, Ahankara. Vijnanamaya is Chitta, and Anandamaya is Chetana. And then the soul. We as souls, we have understood this, that there was never a point in our history that we did not have Linga Sharira. Linga Sharira is always with us. We shed the Linga Sharira only in Moksha Sthiti. So the Linga Sharira is always with us. But even before we come into this universe, into existence, when we are in the womb of Brahman, we are all there as jivas with a Linga Sharira in it. We may be in a suspended animation. We don't know what's going on. But the fact is, at least that's what the Vedas tell us, is that we are always covered with Linga Sharira. As we come into creation, then we acquire Sukshma Sharira. And then when we go transmigrate from one body to another, we shed one Stula Sharira and we get the another Stula Sharira. Okay, so we know, we are now the resident experts on this. Stula Sharira, Sukshma Sharira, Linga Sharira, Karana Sharira, and Jiva Swarupa. And then we are going around this. Go back to those slides where we have done sessions on linking Pindanda and Brahmanda and how the various 24 tattvas of Brahmanda and how they link up with Pindanda and how that links up with Linga, Sukshma, and Stula Sharira and so on. So we have done this before, but I'm just putting this slide as a pointer and as a quick revision. So remember that this Jiva has got all these coverings, material coverings. Starting from Linga Sharira, it has got material coverings. Whereas our Brahman does not have any material coverings. There was never a point in his history that he had any sort of material entanglement. He may be the creator, he may be the controller of this universe, but he never had a material covering. Okay, that literally is the meaning of Akayam. Sorry. So that literally is the meaning of Akayam. So what does Varaha Purana tell us? Akayam Linga Varjanat. Linga means Linga Sharira. So our Paramatma never had Linga Sharira, but we have always had Linga Sharira, and we shed it in Moksha Sthiti, and after that is our, when we, all that story, all that.
Madhu, sorry, what about avatars? Will they not have a Linga Sharira when they have Rama or Krishna avatars?
Yeah, I'm coming to that, Sudarshan, next. Thank you for asking, but absolutely no. There is no material form of the Supreme Lord at all. He who thinks that the Supreme Lord has a material, Katha Upanishad, he says that he falls down and goes to the Andatamas. Yeah, that's what Yama has said. So even in avatars, there is no material attachment at all. It is our ignorance. If we think Rama is got a body with hands, legs and stuff, it is our ignorance. But Rama in himself, he doesn't. He is always Akayam. Akayam Linga Varjana. So Kayam means material covering of the linga sharira. Akayam means no linga sharira. Okay. So I've got a Srimad Bhagavatam verse here. So we recite this many times, isn't it? So who wants to recite this? That we talk about manasa, vacha and all that. Who wants to go for this mantra? Anybody familiar with the Srimad Bhagavatam mantra? Verse, sloka? Okay. Let's go for it, Neetaji, go for it.
Yeah.
Which one? I don't know.
Kayena vacha mansendreva buddhyatmana va anusrut swabhavat karoni
Karoti yadyat.
sakalam parasmai narayana iti samarpaya.
Yes, very good, Sushruth. So there are two verses, Srimad Bhagavatam and Mukundamala, that talk about this. Is a very famous sloka. Kayena vacha manasendreva. Yeah. Kayena. So we think kayena, manasa and vacha. Kaya means we think the body. Manas means the mind. Vacha means the speech. So one rendering, very superficial rendering of this, this body, with this body and speech and mind, whatever we do, we dedicate it to Paramatma, right? But in the core Vedic philosophy, what does that kaya means? Kaya means linga sharira, whereas our Brahman is akayam. Yeah, and you may remember this verse in Katha Upanishad. We spent a lot of time talking about this linga deha, linga sharira, stula deha, and so on, because there is this beautiful verse. Asya visramsa manasya sharirastasya dehinaha. Dehat vimuchyamanasya kimmatra parishishyate etadvaitat. So when this soul sheds all the bodies, what is left? Soul, and inside is the antaryamin. So etat, that person who is inside you, antaryamin, is that Paramatma, who is the same person who is in Vaikuntha. So that is how that verse talks about. Okay. So this is an important idea. We get sorrow. We basically get sorrow because we got a material entanglement. We get sorrow through this body, yeah, that we interact with the external world. So that is the idea, and that is the angle in which Svayambu Manu is coming when he says Akayam. This Brahman is Akayam, therefore he is Shukram. Yeah. Now the next question is, he may not have a linga sharira, but does he have stula sharira and sukshma sharira? So that is the answer to what Sudarshan was asking. Whether Rama and Krishna have stula sharira, they may not have linga sharira, whether they have stula sharira or not. Asnaviram. There is the answer next verse, but I'm jumping one verse. But before Asnavaram, there is one thing called Avranam. Okay, let's do the Avranam and then go to Asnavaram. Remember, I hold on to that Akaya, Shukram, Akayam. Asnavaram. Avranam, sorry, Avranam. Avranam. Okay. Avranam Nitya Purnataha is the Varaha Purana telling us what Avranam is. Nitya Purnataha. Eternally full. Okay. Avranam equals Abranam equals eternally full. How is that possible? Let's look at the etymology of that. Avranam, plus Vranam. Vranam means, in colloquial meaning, it is injury. You get a wound, it's called Vrana. Okay. And when you cut something, that is called Vrana. Okay. That idea of cutting something, you can cut something only if it is limited. You can have a scale that is about, say, 1 foot, and you break into two, because the scale has got a limit, and it's a limited entity. Okay? You need to think about this a bit more. So that is called, that which can be cut is usually that which is a limited entity. Okay? Whereas that which cannot be cut is Avranam, and that which cannot be cut is otherwise called Akhanda. Okay. Akhanda means partless. And this is a very, very important concept in Vedic debate and polemics about this concept called Upadhi, that certain schools of Vedanta claim that because of Upadhi, somehow Brahman becomes Jiva. Okay. But the Vedic philosophy is Brahman is partless. He is Avranam. He is Akhanda. So the problem there is, how can some entity called the Upadhi that can actually attack a part of Brahman and make him into Jiva? There is no answer. The answer still needs to come from that school, but that is their problem. but these are all the concepts of Upadhi, which is very problematic because Vedas describe this Brahman as Akhanda or Avranam. Okay, so here it becomes interesting because I've got two Gita verses here, 2:13 and 2:18. Prakash ji.
Namaskar, sir. I have this question. Does God have his entire Akhanda Rupa itself as Upadhi? Meaning, is there Upadhi for the God which is non-different from him? Is it possible?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether you have done Upadhi, whether you have gone through Upadhi Khandana and the tikas that come from it, where it says if the whole of Brahman is being enveloped by this, then there is no Brahman left. So and there is only one Jiva, so there is no infinite Jivas. If the whole of Brahman is enveloped by this Upadhi, then there are two problems there. One is Brahman is gone, and there will be only one Jiva. There will not be infinite Jivas. I hope that makes sense. But please do refer to the Upadhi Khandana of Acharya that answers those questions.
Okay.
Yeah. So who is going to give us the 2:13 and 18 verse, please? Who wants to recite? Nitaji or Shilaji, go for it. Or Pratibhaji, anybody.
Okay, I can do it. Dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara tatha dehantara praptihi dhirasatra na muhyati antavanta ime dehaha nityasyokta pura sharirinaha anashino prameyasya tasmadyudhyasva bharata.
Thank you, Nitaji. So the Gita, when you look at this, key verses 2:13 and 18, they kind of capture these kind of ideas about Deha, how a Jiva is a very limited being and it has got a Deha. Our Deha is, our material Deha is a type of Upadhi that kind of helps us operate in the material world. But in 2:18, Krishna talks about the Jiva Swarupa itself is an Upadhi for the reflection of this ever-present Brahman who is eternal and omnipresent. So go and check that verses out. So when you compare and contrast 13 and 18, you will understand the ideas of Avranam. So our Svayambu Manu has said, Saha Pariyagad Shukram Akayam Avranam. So here, let's go to the first two words. He is Shukram and he is Akayam. Akaya means he doesn't have any linga sharira. Because he doesn't have any linga sharira, he cannot experience the sorrow of this world. And he is without linga sharira. He doesn't have any material entanglement whatsoever at all. So some person, some clever bloke in inverted commas may then come back and ask, Brahman may not have a linga sharira, but he can have a stula sharira, isn't it? He can have a stula sharira, right? And our Svayambu Manu expects this, and he says, no, he is Asnaviram. Okay, so what is Asnaviram? Varaha Purana tells us what Asnaviram is. Stula dehasya rahityad Asnaviram udahrutam. A very, very clear way of understanding. So this Paramatma does not even have Stula Sharira. Okay. So what does Snaviram actually mean? So Snavira means muscles and nerves. Okay. So Sudarshan will know the answer for 7 dhatus. What are the seven dhatus of Ayurveda, for example, that talks about the gross material coverings? And if you remember in Purusha Shukta, we said Saptasyasan Paridayaha Trishapta Samidaha Kritaha Deva Yadegnyam Tanvanaha Abadnan Purusham Pasun. That particular verse where Saptasyasan Paridayaha, Sapta is 7 coverings, and we've done this. Go back and check those slides out. So the 7 coverings of the Jivas, Shukra, Rasa, Rakta, Mamsa, Meda, and all those stuff, 7, Majja, those are all the 7 gross coverings of the body. So Snaviram basically includes muscles and nerves. So Svayambhu Manu says this Paramatma is Shukram, he is Akayam, and he is also Asnaviram, meaning he neither has subtle material body nor gross material body. He is an entirely different category to himself. Okay, so that is the idea there. So when Svayambu says asnaviram and akayam, means that no material body or entanglement ever to Brahman. Okay. So before I go to the next slide, my very brief question is, why is this upasana important? Why our Svayambhu Manu is telling all us, he is Shukram, he is Akayam, he is Asnaviram. Why is he telling that? Why is this upasana important not only for Svayambhu Manu, but also for us? So what is the view here? Any ideas, any takers for this? Why is he saying this? Okay, no problem. Let me go to this. So the reason why this is important is, Sudarshan, your answer to your question. Brahman is Asnaviram always. He is Akayam always. Not only his Mula Shrupa, but also his Vyuhas, Aniruddha, Pradyumna, Sankarshana, Vasudeva. His avatars. He's, of course, we can say 10 avatars, 24 avatars, whatever. Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. Vyuha forms, Avatara, Amsha, Avesha, Vibhuti. All these forms are Akayam and Asnaviram. They're Akayam and Asnaviram. And of course, this Rigveda mantra we all know as our Antaryamin, isn't it? Rupam Rupam Pratirupo Babuva Tadasya Rupam Pratichakshanaya. Indro Mayabhihi Purarupa Iyate Yuktahi Yasya Harayaha Shatadasha. In each, there are infinite souls. And in each soul, there is a distinct form of Antaryamin. And that Antaryamin is non-different from the Mula Rupa. And both of them are Akayam and Asnaviram. Okay. Our Paramatma is inside the Jiva, and the Jiva is inside a Linga Sharira and a Stula Sharira. Whereas the Paramatma himself does not have a Linga Sharira and a Stula Sharira. So we need to understand this one. So who wants to take up this Gita 4.9, a very important verse, because that verse can be understood only when we understand why Paramatma is Akayam and Asnaviram. So who wants to take the 4.9, please? And in fact, I've put quite a few. So 4.9, 9.11 and 7.24. So all of them are related ideas. Yeah, go for it.
Shall I read, Madhuji?
Yeah, go for it.
Janma karma cha me divyam evam yo veti tattvataha tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti mameti sorjuna. 9.11 avajananti mam mudha manushim tanumashritam param bhavamajananto mama bhuta maheshwaram avyaktam vyaktimapannam manyante mama buddhayaha param bhavamajananto mama vyayam anuttamam. Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
This how God comes as avatar, I think because I remember in Bhagavatam, in Vishnu Loka, they have got different Ayodhya, different, I mean, all gods are there, isn't it? With their, as Bhagavan himself. And is it that they come as they are? Because Krishna was, they say, never came from the womb of Devaki, and even Rama from Kausalya. They just appear, because even Kabira and all, I have heard the same thing. So is it the same thing?
Yes, Sheilaji, and yes, of course, there are certain schools of Vaishnavism that talk about the Goloka Vrindavana, where Krishna is there and he just comes down in this material plane. So that is also one view. And then, yeah, so your view is also described in the Bhagavatam. I agree with you fully. Yeah, thanks, Sheilaji, for that. So very, very beautifully recited those Gita verses. So look at the Janma Karma Cha Me Divyam. Okay, so Janma, my appearance, my avatara is different, mate. My karma is different. Nothing like what you do. I'm entirely different. So the moment you understand that my Janma and karma is Divyam, then you have a chance of spiritual progression. Why do you have the chance of spiritual progression? Because you will understand that me as a person is in a different platform. What is that? So Sutra, for example, gives us in the Mandukya Upanishad, we have done this. Nastanatopi parasya ubayalingam sarvatrahi. And in fact, this particular Shanti mantra itself gives an answer. Purnam adaha, purnam idam, purnat, purnam udachyate, purnasya, purnam adaya, purnameva avashishyate. So every form of the Lord that I've described so far is purna. Akayam avranam is purna. Akayam avranam asnaviram. And that is why we say avatara rupa, mula rupa, bimba rupa, all these are purnam. That is the meaning of this verse. Not that from this Brahman, this universe comes out and this universe will merge back into the Brahman. That is not the Vedic rendering, because there it means universe is infinite. Who said universe is infinite? It is not. Yeah? So there are all those nuances of polemics, but that's for another day. But our understanding of Brahman as Akayam, Avranam, Asnaviram is important. Why? Because for us as journey of souls, we are always starting our journey with Linga Sharira. Yeah, and then we are having Sukshma Sharira and Stula Sharira, and we're going round and round and round in circles, unless we decide that we want to become a mumukshu and an adhikarin, and then now I'm going to make my spiritual journey, and then I'm going to ask all these questions. And then, as Pratibhaji mentioned, I'm going to remove all my ignorance, and I'm also remove all my karmas. And when I do that, I will reach a stage, I will get divine grace. And when that divine grace happens, I will have his darshana. And then I will go to Satyaloka. And then when Chaturmukha Brahma completes his innings, I will go back into the womb of Brahman. And before the next creation, there is a diversification. Some souls come to samsara, some souls go to Andhatamas, and some souls go to moksha, where they dip into the Viraja Nadi, shed their linga sharira, and then go to moksha sthiti. When we go to moksha sthiti, only we become akayam and asnaviram. Okay? This is very important. Brahman is always akayam and asnaviram. But when we contemplate on this Brahman as asnaviram and akayam, then we will have a motivation. Look, I need to reach him. Saha Pariyagat, that is what that verse is. Saha Pariyagat, Shukram Akayam, Avranam Asnavaram. So I am going to now aim to reach that kind of stage as per my capacity. Okay, so that is why understanding this Paramatma as no material entanglement is absolutely essential. The moment we start thinking, oh, Avatara Rupa, Krishna Rama, playing a material flute, having some peacock feathers and stuff like that, the moment we start looking at it from a material angle, we are finished. Okay, so no scope. And that is the reason why, for example, somebody in the satsang probably was there when Krishna was there around Mahabharata time. Probably we are running around maybe as a wolf or a mosquito or even as a human being. We might have been something at that time. But we may not have seen Paramatma as Akayam, Asnaviram, and Abharanam. We would have just seen, oh, this is a person with material entanglement with a peacock feather and he's playing a wooden flute. That is why we are still in samsara, okay? Because if we had proper sakshatkara, we would have seen it differently, which we have not done because of our own ignorance. And that is how you approach this problem. And that is why that 4-9 is very, very important. Janma karma cha me divyam. Hope that makes sense. So we are almost coming to an end. So I thought I will do a lot of stuff, but yeah, we will carry on with the next week. So I hope this makes sense about Saha, Pariyagat, Shukram, Avranam, Sukram, Akayam, Avranam, Asnaviram. So because he is Akayam and Asnaviram, and that, as Pratibhaji said, he doesn't do any bad karmas, he doesn't have any linga sharira where this karmic imprints can happen, and that he'll never have any defects. As Sushrut mentioned, that is why he is described in the very next word as Shuddham. He is pure and he is the purifier. Okay? He is Apapa Viddham. Because he doesn't have linga sharira, he is untouched by evil and is untouched by karmic effects, be it good or bad. Okay? And that is why in Gita 4:14, he said, Namam karmani limpanti name karma palaspruha. Iti mam yo abhijanati karmabhir nasabhadyate. He does not have the karmic effects, but that doesn't mean he's an inert zero entity doing nothing. No, he's constantly doing the activities of looking after, bringing utpatti, sthiti, niyamana, samhara, bandha, moksha, jnana, and ajnana. He's doing eightfold dispensations, cosmic dispensations. He's constantly doing some work. But that work is nothing like yours and mine. That is why Janma Karma Cha Me Divyam. He is doing an entirely different thing with no attachment at all. Unlike us, where whatever we do, there is an attachment. Okay. So he is Akayam Asnaviram Shuddham Apapa Viddham. Okay. So now the interesting question is, if this chap called Brahman, he's got no body at all. He's got no material bodies. You and me have bodies, right? But he has no bodies. How can Brahman, who is bodiless, create this universe? That's another question. Yeah. To create a pot, you need an embodied soul called a potter. Okay, so this fellow, he may be a jiva, but he's got an embodiment. That is why he's called a potter. And he's making a pot. So similarly, if Brahman never has any material entanglements and he doesn't have hands, legs and stuff, how is he actually creating the universe? There are some folks who say that Nirguna Brahman does nothing and there is some guy called Ishvara who does everything. Good luck to them. That is their view, but that is not the Vedic view. Vedas have a different answer to this, and Svayambu Manu immediately answers this. Kavir manishihi paribuhu swayambuhu yata tatyato artan vyadatat shashvatibhyaha samabhyaha. Okay, this is one of the most important verses of Isha Upanishad, directly going Janmadhyasya yataha. When Sutrakara said Atato Brahma Jignasa, and in the second sutra, he defined who this Brahman is as Janmadhyasya yataha. And Svayambu Manu is going along the same angles. If this Brahman is Akayam Avranam Asnaviram, how can he create the universe? And our Svayambu Manu himself then gives the answer as Kavir Manishihi Paribuhu Svayambuhu Yata Tatyato Artan Vyadatat Shashvatibhyaha Samabhyaha. Okay, so we shall see that as to what Svayambu Manu is going to talk to us next week. So I am going to close today's session on that note and say Krishna Pranamastu, and we can take any questions if there are any. Vignesh.
You mentioned, thank you very much. That was very interesting. There are lots of fundamentals clarified further and all linked. You mentioned about stages of knowledge, and you mentioned about Pashyataha as experiential knowledge. And I missed what is Anupashyataha.
So Anu means there are two ways of looking at Anu. So Anubhava or Shastra Anuguna. So those are the two. So there are two Anus there. Anubhava and Shastra Anuguna. So Shastra Anuguna. We can imagine and experience anything, Pragnesh, but when we go through proper scriptural studies, then we experience that becomes Shastra Anuguna Pashyataha.
Thank you. That was very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So looks like there are no further questions. If that is the case, may I request Sushruji to take us through Omkara, please. Thank you, Shushud. Wonderful. So we'll catch up next week for the second half of Mantra 8. So take care, everyone. Good luck. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Good.